Good morning, brothers and sisters. Addressing you like that, of course, leads me nicely into the subject of this morning's exhortation. It's a subject that means a lot to me, particularly as I grow older, and that's the subject of family. Nowadays, it feels like many forces are working to change traditional family values. There are many voices telling us that the family is out of date, maybe even finished. In this country, we're very fortunate to have a welfare state, and that welfare state was brought into being, to some degree, to compensate for when the family system fails, such as when a woman and a child are left fatherless for one reason or another. Unfortunately, these days, it's as often used to intentionally sidestep family responsibilities completely. And I'm wary that I sound a bit like a Tory here, but financing someone's lifestyle choice hardly seems the purpose of our overstretched welfare system. And then in other things in life, on TV, for instance, you rarely see a normal, happy family portrayed. Family values are often attacked and ridiculed, and we're subliminally being told that family is irrelevant, a thing of the past. But what we're going to do this morning is look at what the Bible says about family. And you'll see that the concept of family is extremely important in the Bible, both in a physical and in a spiritual sense. In the very beginning, God created Adam and Eve, a nucleus family, and in Genesis 1:28, God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number." God's plan for creation was for men and women to marry and have children, to become a family. This idea is built upon in the following chapters too. As early as chapter 4 of Genesis, we see family members were to look after and care for one another. When God asked Cain, "Where is Abel, your brother?" Cain's response is flippant. "Am I my brother's keeper?" he said. Well, the implication of that is actually, well, yes, Cain was expected to be Abel's keeper, and vice versa. And the Bible has a more communal sense of family than is generally held in our society today. Where once extended families lived and worked together, cared for their children and the sick, disabled and elderly, as a community, we frequently move far and wide and rely on the state or pay for services, not intentionally, but effectively avoiding assisting our family in those circumstances. It is the way of the world. Furthermore, when God saved Noah from the flood, it wasn't an individual salvation, but a salvation for him, his wife, his sons, and his sons' wives. And when God called Abraham out of Haran, he called him and his family in Genesis 12. And we'll very soon read in our daily readings about the last and most dreadful plague in Egypt, the death of the firstborn. So dreadful because it destroyed thousands of families. And the importance of family can also be seen in the provisions of the Mosaic covenant. For example, 2 of the 10 commandments deal with preserving family. The 5th commandment regarding honouring parents, and the 7th commandment prohibiting adultery, to protect the sanctity of marriage and the unity of family. And this isn't solely an Old Testament concern. The New Testament makes many of the same commands and prohibitions about marriage and divorce, obeying parents, not provoking your children. That one's sometimes very difficult to achieve. But as we know, biblical family is about much more than those we're physically related to. Jesus told us what it means to be part of a family in Matthew chapter 12, verses 46 to 50, where we read that while Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside, wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." And he replied to him, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." Jesus isn't saying that biological family isn't important. He's making the clear point that the most important family connection is spiritual, not physical. Or as John says, "Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God." So everyone here is, by faith, a child of God. And that makes us family. We're a family drawn from every nation, tribe, people and language. And we can see that from our wider fellowship, which really does cover all nations and languages. But the defining characteristic of this spiritual family is love for one another. "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, you must love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Well, in David Attenborough's recent series, Dynasties, he was talking about family being one of the most powerful forces in nature. It really demonstrated, I must admit, so Esther tells me, she watched it, I haven't yet, but it really demonstrated how powerful the familial instinct is. Animals as diverse as lions and penguins have a strong inbuilt desire to protect the weaker members of their family and to preserve the future of their dynasty. But what does this mean for us? We've established that family is important, all family, and we know that this extends beyond the physical to our spiritual family too. And this should mean more than just on a Sunday. We have a duty to love one another, to help and support each other, especially our weaker members, and to prioritise the preservation of our dynasty. In Galatians 6, we're commanded, "As we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers." And further, to carry each other's burdens. Well, in friendships, most people don't stray too far from their own demographic, such as colleagues, maybe people of a similar education. Most certainly, most people have friends of the same age and the same marital status. They enjoy the same pastimes, participate in the same activities, maybe sports or music, that kind of thing. But friendships can be a bit tenuous. They can ebb and flow over the years for many reasons. For example, I have friends I wouldn't see if I stopped going to watch rugby from time to time. And people you thought you'd always remain close to drift away. And only being human, we have fallouts too. You move on, you lose contact, and that's the end of it. But family shouldn't be like that. Your relationship with family goes beyond a shared interest. I'll visit my mother without needing a reason. And so we find here at church that maybe not all of us would be friends in the ordinary sense. We're a variety of ages, from a variety of backgrounds, and we may not necessarily feel we have a lot in common with each other, aside from our faith. but that faith makes us family, and we should therefore make more of an effort to treat each other like family. So how do we create a strong spiritual family? Well, it's a sad feature of life today that we're connected by so much social media, yet cannot always connect at the deepest level of love and meaning with one another. It's vital to build true connections if we're going to bear each other's burdens, and these are only built through effort, making sure we spend time together and get to know each other so that we can trust each other enough to both give and, just as importantly, receive advice, encouragement, help and support. And remember, not just spending time with those we maybe naturally feel closer to, but all our family members. So let's make an effort this week to reach out to at least one member of our spiritual family who we don't usually speak to. Another important element of a strong family is compromise, trying to understand each other. And Paul expands on this in our Romans reading for today, where we read, "One person considers one day more sacred than another. Another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. Whoever regards one day as special does so to the Lord. Whoever eats meat does so to the Lord, for they give thanks to God. And whoever abstains does so to the Lord, and gives thanks to God. For none of us lives for ourselves alone, and none of us dies for ourselves alone. If we live for the Lord, and if we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. For this very reason Christ died and returned to life, so that he might be the Lord of both the dead and the living. You then, why do you judge your brother or sister? Or why do you treat them with contempt? For we will all stand before God's judgment seat. Above all, we need to display love for our family. This can be caring for physical needs, such as we read about Job doing in Job 31. He was able to say with confidence that he had not kept his bread to himself, but shared it with the fatherless, and he had warmed the needy and anyone perishing for lack of clothing with the fleece from his sheep. But we can also display love through forgiveness. And perhaps the best example of how a family should love and treat one another was demonstrated in the parable of the prodigal son. We all know the story. The younger son left the family home, spent all his money, and ended up feeding the pigs. Before of course deciding that he would be better off going home, even if he did not dare to hope he could receive his father's forgiveness. Of course, the patient father, always looking for his son to return and always ready to forgive and receive him back, is a type of God himself. But perhaps we can also see ourselves in both characters. Maybe you can identify with the son. Maybe you've pushed away your family, physical or spiritual, for whatever reason. And pride may now be preventing you from restoring that relationship. Or maybe you've been wronged or abandoned and feel like the father, waiting for the errant child to see the error of their ways. Unconditional love and forgiveness is what differentiates family from shallow friendships. And this is what we need to display to each other. It should be what gives us the confidence and security to face the world, whether at work, school, or wherever, knowing that we have our family behind us, supporting and caring for us. Ultimately, though, we're part of a heavenly family. We're God's children, and we're Christ's brothers and sisters. In 1 John 3 we read, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God." And that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it does not know Him. Dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been made known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like Him, for we shall see Him as He is. We cannot and must not doubt that great love which the Father has lavished on us, His children, because we have all the evidence we need here on this table.